Brant DXT grain carts have efficient unload speeds, large carrying capacities, unmatched durability, and reliable components that make sure your cart is working when you are. Lead the field with DXT grain carts from Brant. Visit your local Brant dealer for more information.
Joining me now from near Fillmore, Saskatchewan, it's Jake Leguee. He's a, canola and wheat farmer, but there's probably a few other things in the rotation. And you probably recognize him from the Farmer Rapid Fire, but today we're talking very specifically about this canola tariff issue. Jake, welcome here.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Lindsay.
Now, as I mentioned, of course, it's been a heck of a week in Western Canada for canola growers, staring down the barrel of this nearly 80% tariff. It's 76-ish tariff that China has imposed on Canadian canola seed. What was your first reaction when you got news of this?
Yeah, I mean, in some sense, I guess it shouldn't be terribly surprising that China took action against Canadian canola. I mean, they certainly signaled that close to a year ago now that they were interested in coming back at us for the EV tariffs. But at the same time, I mean, that isn't our day job to be watching what foreign markets are doing. We're getting very close to harvest, so our focus is on the crop and getting it off as good a condition as we can. So, I mean, we're desiccating lentils, we're combining winter wheat, and this news comes out. It obviously is still a bit of a shock, even if there is sort of that deep-seated expectation that something is coming. The day that it comes is still a surprise and a disappointment.
Now, for those who follow along or follow you on social media, they'll know that you will put your thoughts down, pen to paper, although it's not a pen anymore, or paper, but did write a column sort of outlining your frustration over how we even got here. Because as you mentioned, it isn't a surprise. China had announced other tariffs on meal and oil. We know that this is how China does business or tries to exert, what it wants, and that it is retaliation for Canada imposing 100% tariffs on EV vehicles from China. In that op-ed that you wrote, you view this very much as the Canadian government choosing, essentially, one sector over another. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, the Canadian government has to make a lot of choices about, well, everything. When it comes to foreign policy, obviously, they have to decide when they're dealing with a market like China that can be difficult and can be quite reactive, how to best protect its industries. And I wouldn't presume to understand all the nuances of the EV tariffs. But, certainly when those tariffs went on, it became quite clear to us very quickly that there were going to be consequences for this that were probably going to land on us. Canola is a symbolic product of Canada. China does like to use it as an example. We've seen it before and not that long ago. So, when that happened, it was just that feeling of, oh, here we go again. Now, the choices that Ottawa makes when it comes to protecting EV tariffs, I'm not trying to pick on one party or another. It does sound like that was fairly unanimous, but the impact hits us and certainly did in a big way this time. So I guess the question that I have to ask is, okay, so you've made this decision to protect this industry partially to align with the United States, but, you know, obviously there is an interest in protecting the auto industry. Um, the impact is going to be borne by farmers. So what are we going to do about that? And I think what I've been very disappointed by so far is there just hasn't been a lot of conversation. There hasn't been a lot of position statements by our prime minister or agriculture minister. A couple of ex posts talking about that this is a problem. They're going to deal with it, but actions matter more than words. And like I said earlier, this wasn't necessarily a huge shock that something happened with tariffs on canola. So the fact that the government has yet to make a response in any significant way beyond some words is disappointing. There was very quick activity when the auto sector was threatened and other industries in the East threatened, understandably so. The survival of those industries was at stake because of tariffs from the United States. But this could change the canola industry as we know it and could have an enormous impact on the future of our farms. And, it's an industry that's worth, better part of $40 billion, $5 billion exports to China. And we continue to not hear a plan. And that part of it has been quite disappointing. So I think, in terms of East versus West, I don't want to get caught up in that, but it does seem like there isn't quite as much interest or activity in supporting an industry that may very well need it if these tariffs stick.
What would you like that support to look like? Do you have something in mind as to what the government could be doing that maybe they aren't doing?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a complicated situation, and I don't want to sound like there's just these five quick, simple solutions that are going to solve the whole problem, because that isn't the case. I do think that there are a few things the government could do to at least signal to farmers that they are interested in helping us out. Dropping the EV tariffs is probably unlikely at this point. There seems to be cross-party support, and angering the Americans beyond how angry they already seem to be at Canada, at least within the American government, is probably not the best approach when they're our largest market for canola. So if that's not a solution that's on the table, perhaps it isn't that simple to get China to just drop the tariffs. So we have to find other solutions if that's the case. Renewable diesel and biodiesel has been touted as a huge opportunity, sustainable aviation fuel. But we still have some issues to deal with the Americans when it comes to the renewable identification number credits and everything else that RealAgriculture has done a lot of work on reporting on. If we could get some changes made there, that could honestly solve a huge part of this problem. Renewable diesel could be a larger opportunity in Canada as well. This discussion about forcing all new vehicle sales to be electric within the next decade, that's not very helpful on that front either, and has a whole bunch of other problems that have got farmers quite upset as well. There's some opportunities there. I also think this is a great opportunity to take a better look at agri-stability. We saw some very small improvements put forward during the election or right before the election campaign. We're still looking at getting paid a percentage of a reference margin. It's not going to help in this situation unless the farm is already experiencing a loss, because agri-stability is not going to kick in to protect a profit. It's going to kick in to prevent a catastrophic loss. Okay. When agri-stability was first released, it was 85% of the reference margin. Maybe we could look at going back to that, or maybe we need to tear the whole program down and start over. But right now, that program isn't working, and it isn't going to protect farmers in this situation. Direct payments, it's an option that I hesitate to ask for, because getting government more involved with my farm isn't what I want. But the reality is that the government has made political decisions that has put one of our largest export markets at risk. Now, they're waiting for those decisions is what it is, but those decisions were still made, and we're still getting impacted by them. So the government is going to have to do something about this. If it's just going to let this market go away and let the canola market sort itself out, that's I would say a disappointing response, because the importance of this industry, and because this is something that we've absolutely no control over as individual farmers. If the government is going to make political decisions that are going to impact my livelihood, I don't think it's too much to ask for them to look at possible solutions to at least minimize the impact of that.
Do you think, in covering this issue and speaking with so many farmers like yourself in Western Canada, we often hear there isn't necessarily a ton of support for Canadian biofuel policy. I'm not going to say that's across the board, but if we're going to hear pushback, it often is on the Western Canadian side. Do you think this will shift the needle for some of those farmers who have struggled maybe to support a biofuel policy or a more expansive biofuel policy because of these structural changes to the market that really could be, as you said, I mean, if this tariff doesn't go away, that's a huge market that won't be taking Canadian canola, at least directly.
It's hard to say what the impact will be on farmers' perception of the clean fuel standard. I mean, farmers have an aversion to, being taxed. That's part of the reason the farmers have been so opposed to the carbon tax, I being one of them. The clean fuel standard, though, does have an opportunity, quite a significant opportunity for Canadian farmers. And I think, farmers need to look very carefully at it before dismissing it as another, climate change program. Rural parts of Canada could really benefit from this too. This isn't just benefiting farmers, programs like this. So to me, I think this is an opportunity that we really need to be looking at. We just think so differently about this than the American farmers tend to. Biofuels have been a huge part of the American farmers' income stream for quite a few years now. They're very supportive of it. That support doesn't seem to be as strong here, and I've never exactly understood why, but I think it's time for that to change.
Mm-hmm. I would say I observed something very similar, Jake, on the western side. Here in Ontario, it aligns, I think, a little bit more with the U.S. because of corn and because of the ethanol side. So and maybe that's part of the reason is that has sort of led on that side. But it is just such a huge user of the crops that farmers grow, and that demand sometimes can make all the difference. So definitely a lot of dynamics to try and balance here. Jake, thank you so much for making time. I know it is, as you mentioned, a busy time of year. You're on and off the sprayer and prepping for harvest. So I do appreciate the time so much. For those who maybe want to read your column that you wrote, what is the website where they can go and check it out and read it?
Go to thelifeofafarmer.com to find it.
All right. Jake, thanks so much for joining me here on Real Ag Radio. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Lindsay, for the opportunity.